Bao was going bow, bow, bow on somebody and then never saw them again. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel, Apparently Ashley, and today we're talking about Married at First Sight, Season 13, Episode 6. This week's episode was focused on the last day of the honeymoon for the couples, so they had some additional conversations with each other to try to get to know each other more, and then they did a couple of group activities with the other spouses just so they could spend quality time together. Other than that, not gonna lie, kind of boring, could have done without it. It was longer than it needed to be, but producers make decisions. Here we are, an extra episode, yay. I did have a few reactions to a few things here and there, so let's go ahead and get started with that. But before we do, go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and while you're down there, hit the thumbs up icon too. Thanks. All right, y'all know how I feel about Brett and Ryan, so we're gonna start with them first today. So they went kayaking, and Brett is apparently very afraid of water activities, and I was like, please show footage of her acting up, because remember, she was apparently acting up when she was on that plane, but they didn't have no footage from that. And I was like, I want to see how she acts when she's super afraid, but she handled it pretty well. She was mainly afraid of the manatee that was in the water, and Ryan was over there like, look at him, touch him, jump in the water with him. And she was like, no, I don't want to see him. But I mean, she did fine, and it was super cute because she was obviously scared, but she was just like, you know what, I'm gonna do this anyway because I know that he's gonna have my back. I trust him, and if anything happens to me, he's gonna be there for me, right? And so this is very similar to the conversation we had last week about Myrla and Gil, because remember, she didn't want to get on the plane over the water, and she ended up doing it anyway because that's what Gil wanted to do. And we talked about doing stuff for or with your spouse because that's what they want to do, compromise the point of relationships, yay, all that stuff. So I thought it was pretty cool that she still ended up doing it, and I'm sure that made Ryan feel all warm and fuzzy inside. They also had a conversation about how they're on different sides of like their political view spectrum, what have you, and she was saying that like it's somewhat of a big deal for her that they don't see things the same way, and he was just like, oh, it's a non-issue, like this isn't a big deal, it's fine, whatever. So I wonder how much of a deal breaker this really is for her, and like, are they gonna have deeper conversations about this? Is this going to play a factor in if they stay together or not? So I'm interested to see how that all plays out. All right, next let's jump into Rachel and Jose. So Rachel had a list of questions for Jose. First off, let me say, my type of girl, because one thing I love to do when I first meet somebody is play 21 questions, okay? I remember when I first met my boyfriend, we had this list of 200 questions that we just found on Google, and we spent all this time like texting back and forth, answering these questions with each other, and I was like, yes, forget organic conversation. Let's just ask each other these random questions and get to know each other that way. So I was here for it. One of the things she asked him is, what is something you want to do before we have kids? And she had talked about traveling. Like, she really wants to go to Switzerland, and she usually does one big trip every 2 years, and she does like smaller trips like twice a year. And Jose was like, let's kind of scale that back. Switzerland sounds like a lot of money. Let's go to like Vegas. And Rachel was like, what? And you can just tell that she is worried that she's not going to be able to live this life that single Rachel used to live, and that Jose is going to essentially impede upon that, right? One of the reasons he gave for like wanting to scale it back was that when they're prepping for kids, they need to be saving money for when the kids arrive. I get that. Also, can we not do both? I don't know. I also wonder if he's assuming the responsibility of paying for the entire trip, because from what he's shown us so far, he wants to take on that provider role of like paying for everything and like doing everything for Rachel. He heard Switzerland and he's like, oh, I have to pay for all of that. That sounds expensive. Let's just go gamble in Vegas instead. And so if he's thinking like that, then I could see why he's like automatically, no, we're not doing that. So more questions need to be asked, of course, as always. I think a lot of these conversations could be hashed out with additional questions, but either they're not showing those questions or they're just not asking these questions. Jose also did mention his near perfect credit score of 815, and that immediately intimidated Rachel or made her feel some type of insecurity of some sort. She had asked him, like, did you ask the experts to pair you with someone who has all their stuff together? Because, hey, I don't. And he was like, yeah, I asked them to pair me with someone who's on the same level as me. And you could just see it in her face. Look at it. That she was like, that's not me. I'm not on your level. You're on level 10. I'm on level like 7. If that. But I will say, from what he's shown us so far, that he's willing to help her get better in the areas that she wants to get better in, because she talked about finances and how she wants to work on saving, and he was like, okay, I'm down to help you with that. She talked about how she's not that clean. He'll help her with that. And he doesn't seem like he's coming from like this pushy place of like, you have to be like me. Like, she's saying these things and he's just like, okay, cool, like if you want help, I'll help you then. So like, that seems reasonable to me. So I hope that she just doesn't internalize this insecurity and start to like take it out on him. Or maybe, hey, they could have a conversation about it. That'd be helpful. All right, let's go on to your favorite person, Myrla, along with her spouse, Gil. So Gil's trying to figure out like, what is the root of why Myrla is the way that she is? And so he was asking her, like, how did you grow up? Like, have you always been this way? Like, what made you so particular? And she talked about how she grew up poor, and she described her childhood home and how she's always had this like desire to go shopping. And essentially that's why she lives this lifestyle she lives now, because she always wanted this when she was younger. Now she has the means to have this, and so she has it. And Gil was just like, okay, I'm starting to understand her more. This makes sense. Like, she didn't choose this life chose her. And I really appreciated Gil like asking those type of like deep rooted questions, because one thing about me, if you asking me questions about like why I am the way I am, or like how did I get this way, I eat those type of conversations up for breakfast, okay? I love it. So I thought that was very intentional of him, of showing this effort of him trying to get to know her and not just marking her off and being like, I want to be with a person like this. Like, let me try to figure out why she is like this. Also, let me note that I like Myrla, y'all. I know that we've been talking about her, but at this point, she's funny. Like, every time she complains, y'all should take a shot. It should now be a game. Take a shot every time Myrla complains about something. But like, is she the best candidate for the show? Not necessarily, but like, the more the episodes keep going on and I'm seeing the effort that she's putting in, like the chocolate chip cookies, she got Gil a plate of chocolate chip cookies because while they were on the honeymoon, he mentioned how he really loves chocolate chip cookies. And I was like, that was so sweet of her. So like, she is trying. Y'all give her a chance. Come on over. I like her. So they did have a little bump in the road later on in the day, because Gil was saying that he's interested to see how Myrla interacts with his dog Hype, which is, I don't know what kind of dog it is. Have y'all ever seen Homeward Bound and the dog Chance? That's what it looked like. I don't know what kind of dog he is, but he looked like that. And Myrla was like, well, just so you know, I'm not doing anything with that dog. I'm not picking up the poop. I'm not walking it. I'm not touching it. I don't want to interact with that dog at all. And so Gil was like, hey, just so you know, I work multiple 24-hour shifts at the station. So I'm gonna need someone as in you, walk the dog twice a day. And she was like, you ain't got no dog walker? And he was like, yeah, but the dog walker's not gonna come to our apartment and do it. And she was like, well, get another one. And he was like, listen, that is a waste of money. And y'all know Myrla. She was like, no, it's not. And Gil really took that to heart. And he was like, I'm going to have a really hard time trying to get to know you further because of this answer. So it's evident that this dog is like a hard line in the sand for Gil when it comes to like, you have to accept this part of him in order to be with him, which makes sense because with people and their pets mean a lot. Like, I have a dog, so I get it. But also, he has to understand that like Myrla doesn't like dogs. Like, she don't want nothing to do with it. And she made a good point saying, like, if I wanted to take care of a dog, then I would have a dog. But I don't have one because I don't want to do those things. And she was like, this responsibility is being pushed upon me when I'm not asking for it. So they didn't wrap up the conversation at all. So I'm interested to see how that's gonna play out once they move in together, because the previews definitely showed him kissing the dog, and she was like, oh, you kissed that dog? And he was like, well, you ain't kissing me, so I gotta get it from somewhere. So we'll see. All right, let's talk about Bao and Johnny. So if y'all remember last week, Bao was talking about how she would get bullied for her snores because apparently they're really loud and obnoxious. And she brought it up again the next morning to Johnny. And she was saying, like, I really just hope that you understand where I was coming from with how I was bullied by this, and like, it's a very sensitive subject for me. In his confessional, he was saying, like, I hope these type of conversations aren't going to become the norm, meaning like petty argument type of things, because he was just like, why are we still talking about this? And he was also saying that, like, this is the point in the relationship when he would ghost this person, get back on the dating app, and start over with somebody else, because he would see this as a red flag. And so he didn't say any of this to Bao in the moment, but later on in the day, he was like, you know what? I want Bao to be completely open and honest and transparent with me, so I need to do the same for her. So they're laying in the hammock. He's like, hey, like, I really don't want to lie to you. This is how I was feeling earlier. Like, I would usually run at this point in the relationship because of the conversation we were having earlier, but clearly I'm married now, so I'm stuck, right? And Bao took it really well. She was just like, you know, I appreciate you telling me this. Like, I could tell that you were having some doubts. And like, just so you know, I really am trying to. Pause. Let me say this. I loved this scene because of the nonverbal communication that was in it. So one thing about me, I am a sucker for some good, effective communication. And so Johnny knew that he was about to have this tough conversation with Bao. It was already tough for him to express his feelings. It's not a conversation that's going to make her feel all warm and fuzzy inside. And he didn't know how she was going to react to it. So when he's telling her this, he's touching her the entire time. And I thought that was just like so powerful and beautiful, that like, it just immediately softens the blow when like you're talking to your significant other about something that's like a tough conversation, and they're just touching you the whole time, because it's just like, hey, I'm here for you. It's like this sense of security, this sense of trust. And so I really enjoyed it. I also might be reading deeper into it because, again, I just love stuff like that, but I thought it was great. And I'm sure that played a factor into how she responded to him. The whole point of him saying that was like, I just want you to stop living in the past, even stop focusing so much on the little details in the present, and just really enjoy being with me. And let's not try and like harp so much on things that don't necessarily matter in the grand scheme of things, right? And I was like, Johnny, are you talking to me or are you talking to Bao? Because I too harp on things in the past and in the present instead of just enjoying the moment and living. Y'all comment below if you can relate. So later on in the episode, Bao brought up Johnny's hygiene regimen. So apparently Johnny showers like 3 times a day, and Bao was saying like, you know, sometimes I just get home from working out and I just want to pass out, or I had a really long day at work and I don't feel like showering. So let's talk about that. Mind you, she said that the standard for her is that she showers once a day. However, there are times when there are exceptions to that rule and she might not shower. And so Johnny was like, I'm not looking for you to be just like me when it comes to showering. However, if you just worked out or if you had a really long day, I'm gonna need you to shower, or we're gonna have to be changing the sheets every day, and I don't want to do that. And so Bao was like, let's say I come home from working out and I just want to go to sleep and I don't want to shower. Can I just sleep on the couch? And he was like, why don't you just get in the bed and then just change the sheets? And she was like, I don't want to do that. And his face was like, why are we talking about this? And so when she was saying all this, I was laughing in my head because I was like, girl, Bao, me and you be doing the same thing. So Bao stated like what would normally happen on a regular day, but then brought up like the exceptions to that, right? Like I had stated earlier. And she wants to have a conversation about these hypothetical situations that aren't as likely to happen. And now it's potentially going to be an argument, right? Or it's another red flag to Johnny. I was just like, why do we do this? Like, why do we create these situations and want to have conversations about them when it hasn't even happened and probably won't even happen? Do y'all know what I'm talking about? Can y'all relate? Let me know down below if you also do this. And by this, I mean have unnecessary conversations with your partner that are supposed to ease your mind but just end up causing tension. All right, so I had mentioned there were a few group settings during the episode. So the first one was they all went to dinner together and they talked about who has consummated the marriage yet, basically who done did the nasty. Nobody has yet. And they were making guesses on like who probably has. And of course everyone was pointing to Jose and Rachel because they stay touching each other. He be twirling her hair, grabbing her neck, kissing her hands, all this stuff. Like they stay touching. And so like personal bubbles are not a thing for them. So people would naturally think that they've had sex, but they haven't. And then they were talking about Bao and Johnny and if they've had sex as well, but they haven't. All the couples did talk about emotional intimacy and how like that's way more important to them than having sex at this point in the experiment, but like they all want to at some point. Little do they know, Zack and Michaela are the only ones who have done that, and they weren't there because, as y'all know, Zack has COVID and Michaela went back to Houston since she can't be around Zack. So the other group activity they did was go on this boat. They went to the middle of the water and they did some paddle boarding. Johnny got lost in the middle of the ocean. That was kind of funny. And the wives had this conversation about how they're so used to being independent, but now they're with these men who just want to do everything for them. And now they feel like they're losing their independence of some sort. Of course, Myrla wasn't saying that, but you know, that was basically the topic of conversation. Oh, how could I forget? While they were on the boat, they were playing Never Have I Ever, a game that is almost guaranteed to get you in trouble depending on who you're playing with. And one of the things was, never have I ever gone streaking. Y'all go ahead and guess who went streaking. Ryan. Of course he has. He looks like those like typical frat boys in college who are like banging beer cans against their head and like streaking across the yard or something. They said, never have I ever had a one-night stand. Guess who did that? Bao. I was like, what? Okay. Bao was going bow on somebody and then never saw them again. And then they said, never have I ever cheated. And Rachel has cheated before. And so Jose was like, oh my gosh, I married a cheater. And I was like, okay, you don't know the girl's story. You don't know when she cheated. She even said she was young and dumb. And I was just like, here we go. Because he was like, my dad cheated on my mom, so I don't want to be with someone who cheated. But I mean, of course that makes sense, but like, listen to the girl's story and reasoning before just making these assumptions about her. So last is Michaela and Zack, but as I had mentioned last week and a little bit in this episode, y'all know Zack has COVID, and so Michaela had to go back to Houston. He did see the spouses for a little bit because they threw up some beers to him, to his room, and then they were talking to him while he was standing on the balcony, just asking him if he's doing okay. And then they also FaceTimed him while they were at dinner. So they've been interacting with him a little bit, but we didn't really see them in this episode because of him being sick. So we will see more of them next week. All right, y'all, that wraps up my review of Married at First Sight season 13 episode 6. Make sure that you're subscribed if you're not already, so that way you can see when I post my next video. It looked like some good things are happening next week, good as in juicy as in entertaining, so I'm excited to see that, and I'll see y'all next week. Bye.